y'all? This is RevFit Radio, and I'm your host, Sean Garcia. We're back and kicking off season 3. As you can visibly see, there's some big differences with this season. We're bringing in some video recording into the season to add a extra component and dynamic to our interviews. We had a preview episode that came out a couple of days ago, so definitely check out that preview episode so you can hear about all the cool things that we have planned for this season. And of course, one of them being the videos. But we don't want to get too long-winded with that because we did a whole preview episode about it. So we're going to kind of just jump into our first episode here. And we're joined by our first guest of the season. It's a special one for us. We're joined by Qiana Mickie. And is it Mickey or Mickey?
Oh, Mickey.
Yeah. I was like, is it Mickey, McKee? I'm like Mickey Mouse. It sounds like Mickey. So Qiana, she's worked with, she's worked with some of the leading food-based nonprofits in New York City, and she's had a focus on increasing access to locally grown and healthy food to diverse communities and fostering food sovereignty and developing social enterprise driven and equitable business models and, more of this kind of food access and food justice work. Qiana most recently worked as a strategic co-leader at a New York City-based food hub, and as a community-supported agriculture, or CSA, which we'll talk about in a little while, the CSA Network Manager for Just Food. So Qiana, thanks for joining us today.
Oh, thanks for having me. I'm excited.
Cool. So let's just kind of get into your background and, who you are, where you come from, and kind of how you got into this work.
Oh, yeah. So I grew up in the Bronx. I'm Bronx bred, Harlem living right now. I've been here for 11 years. I always tried to volunteer and focus in the community. And when I started thinking about my health and the health of my son, it started to lead me to issues of food and why I didn't have certain access to certain foods that I was starting to eat in my communities, first in the Bronx and then when I came to Harlem. And I'm always volunteering in different things, and that kind of led me to finding out about a community advocacy training that Just Food was actually having. So way before I started there. And between trying to get healthy and exercising more, bringing yoga into my life and starting to build a practice, and then connecting food to it, it opened the door to other pieces like policy, justice issues, inequity in food and health disparities. So I just started to kind of roll with it, had a chance to start doing more policy work, wanted to do more policy work, do more work in the community. And one thing led to another. One workshop led to advocating and doing advocacy around the Farm Bill, to now trying to incorporate racial equity. So for the past few years, trying to build that into my work as well.
Awesome. So you didn't go to school for any of this. You kind of just worked through like a grassroots direction?
Absolutely. Yeah. My degree is in marketing. I really all my learning and expertise that I build and I'm learning from and continuing to learn from is from the grassroots. I did take a food hub management certificate. I earned one. I took a program out of the University of Vermont last year. It was the first program of its kind. So that's like really, other than my trainings, the only food-based educational work that I have, but all of this has been on the ground, working with folks and learning from elders.
Awesome. And so for our listeners, can you kind of paint a picture for, for maybe people aren't familiar with the Bronx or what it looks like, or Harlem? Can you talk about the communities and, maybe we can start defining things like, food deserts and what those kind of things actually mean? Yeah,
sure. So for me, the way I see the Bronx and the way I see Harlem are different neighborhoods and networks of vibrant communities of full and rich of history, culture, connected to each other, longstanding and very resilient. I think we've gone through many phases. A lot of us are facing gentrification. A lot of these communities have faced definite systemic racism and disparities that have really carved out major problems through education, through food access, lack of food access, and have really used our communities as just straight throughways to get to other more affluent communities, as opposed to seeing us as the asset, resource, and rich communities that we are. So to me, that kind of creates these disparities, and it really highlights the different forms of systemic racism that we see and that we hear of. For me and others, some people have issues or feel like the term food deserts is problematic. For me, I feel like I know the history of it. It came from academia in Scotland trying to talk about issues there, and not really suited for us. And then it came to kind of America again through academia and big businesses co-opting the term to kind of describe our communities. And again, when you hear food desert, you think barren, you think less, you think empty, you think nothing. And in fact, these are communities that are asset rich in many ways. We are lacking certain things, but the reason why we're lacking those things are systemic. So for me, I feel like the term food desert, I don't kind of use that because it kind of marginalizes and minimizes the work of existing history and culture that already exists in those communities. So when you say food deserts, it sounds like there's nothing there, there's no food, healthy or otherwise. And you're kind of, say for instance, like in the Bronx, you're like not speaking to the work of like Tanya Fields of the Black Project, you're not speaking of Cheryl Durant, the garden manager, Kelly Street Garden. These are, Karen Washington, the Garden of Happiness, La Finca de Sol. There's so many urban farms, urban gardens throughout our communities that people have been growing food, growing for the community, growing to live, taking over land, trying to keep land that had been, neglected for years to bring something to the community, whether through just flowers, herbs, and food. And when you hear food desert, it kind of tries to whitewash that. And it says like you're lacking outside external factors and you need other people to come in to tell you what to do, to show you how to eat, how to raise your food. And that's not really true.
Right.
Yeah. So.
Oh yeah, that's great. So maybe there's another term we can use, or maybe we could just reference the communities by their names. But what is like the reality for a lot of us living in these neighborhoods and oppressed neighborhoods around? I mean, not only in New York City, but throughout the country and the world. I mean, people. I think the common argument is that people don't really care about their bodies and they just kind of want to eat whatever. And, people in poor neighborhoods are just ignorant to, what healthy foods are and what's good and bad for their body. But can you talk about, like when someone walks out of their apartment and they're trying to find something to eat, what's kind of the struggles that we're dealing with?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of times in these communities, what we have found there is more of an influx of fast food, processed food. We're losing support of small businesses that were actually bringing food to our communities. And as big business grows, as more ways of creating new sweet, tasty, salty foods increase, there's more products like that. There's more businesses that are going to sell that, as opposed to creating space and shelf life for things that have, lower shelf life, for things that are fresh and real. I mean, I think a lot of this so when you walk out, you're seeing snacks, you're seeing, tasty cakes, you're seeing sodas, you're seeing fast food, fried chicken joints, things like that, and not as many healthful alternatives or businesses. And also it's like a loss of a lot of small business. For me, I'm starting to see a definite influx of what felt like suburban pieces, like Whole Foods are starting to sprout out in communities that weren't there before. Trader Joe's, you're starting to see 7-Elevens. There's like 2 7-Elevens now between you and me in Harlem, like in like a 5-block radius.
I know. I'm like, I want a Slurpee. Where those things come from? haven't
You know,
seen them in a
so
long time. Yeah.
yeah, so we're starting to see these in our communities where before there were mom and pop stores, there were bodegas, there were meat markets and fruit stands and folks selling food that we're used to in our homes, culturally relevant foods or things that we're able to kind of make the foods that we're used to at home. We're starting to see less of that because the rents are getting so high, and seeing more of these very easy, accessible, cheaply made and cheaply grown and cheaply processed foods, like at every step that you go. Or in other pockets that are having gentrification, you're getting that and these like very high level restaurants that are also like equally inaccessible or inaccessible because of cost.
Right. And you also, you've done a lot of work around policy. Can you talk about some of the systemic stuff going on a federal level that might affect us here locally? You know, like what, you know, the USDA, the U.S. Department of Agriculture, or these other governing bodies, what kind of things that they have been doing or not doing that kind of affect the situation?
Yeah. So yeah, there's different policies on the national, regional, and federal level. Some things that kind of have come down to the city level and some folks might see in their communities have been some of the healthy food financing initiatives or the FRESH program, where they're trying to work in communities that had been designated or had been considered food deserts in the past based on the USDA description of a food desert. And it started bringing in supermarkets. And it's weird. And I mean, maybe you know something about this too. It's like in some of our communities, we're seeing the closing of supermarkets. And yet in other ways, we're seeing the increase of supermarkets. And I think, you know, every neighborhood should have options and should have grocery stores and should, you know, sell and have the things that people need and want on a regular basis. To me, what I'd like to see more of is more policy around and more funding and support of smaller businesses and more community grown social enterprise food-based businesses like CSAs, or known as community supported agriculture, and bringing more of that in and making that more accessible to community folks. Right now, the USDA offers CSAs to accept SNAP, which is like food stamps at CSAs, but the burden of the paperwork, and you know this, is so high that many CSAs feel too burdened because they're volunteer run or the farmers are too busy farming to really handle that kind of burdensome paperwork. You're seeing, you know, I'm hoping to see more farmers markets in our communities. I'm hoping to see more community-based farmers markets, you know, farmers markets that are run by and for the community and building those relationships with farmers. So I think there needs to be a healthy, diverse mix, just like our communities, of our options in terms of where we're growing and what we're buying from and what kind of producers, because it's also like fresh fruit and vegetables, but I also think about folks that still want to eat meat, value-added products, so things that are made with those fruits and vegetables like ketchups, mayonnaise, hot sauce, things like that. I want to continue to see, and I try to continue to push for policies that I'm hearing from the ground and I'm hearing from folks that they want to see in their communities. So not just addressing food access, but also trying to address food justice in this work. Because you can bring in a supermarket into a neighborhood, but if that supermarket is geared towards the new folks, gentrified folks, there's still going to be an issue of access because you're still those folks that had been here and had struggled through not having those grocery stores are still not going to be able to access those grocery stores. So there'll still be this distance and this gap between healthy food and folks that are able to buy it. So what I try to do is advocate for policies that are trying to work the full chain and build, you know, continuing to work on equitable value chains. So that means having more folks that look like us in our farming and in our agriculture, urban and rural. That looks like increasing the opportunity for community-based organizations and CSAs to offer SNAP and making it easy, getting that information out to folks. It's also having these different various options of grassroots groups and organizations and models that can kind of bring food in, the food that we also deserve, whether that's organic, sustainable, it's your choice. farmers markets, CSAs, farm stands, food boxes, things like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, the example of the Whole Foods that's opening up on 125th Street and Malcolm X Boulevard over here in Harlem, you know, many people are you know, there's mixed emotions about it because, like you said, you know, every neighborhood, regardless of its, you know, its class disparities and, you know, whatever, every neighborhood should have access to different options and access to good things. You know, there's nothing too good for, you know, poor and working people, you know. But at the same time, like you said, you know, if a Whole Foods on, you know, Lenox Avenue is opening up, are the prices meeting, you know, are people in the neighborhood who have been in the neighborhood for decades, are they able to, you know, afford the stuff at that Whole Foods? And are people from the neighborhood being employed by that Whole Foods? And so these are a lot of the questions that I think are out there. You know, what are they going to be doing about it? Because like you said, you know, Whole Foods can accept SNAP, but, you know, why, if I'm, you know, receiving benefits, why would I buy, you know, a loaf of bread for $5 when I could buy it for $2? You know, and, you know, it's not like my food stamp quota has gone up.
Exactly.
I'm not receiving more money on that end. So, you know, it's causing a lot of mixed emotions in the neighborhood. So,
Exactly.
how should people approach the opening of something like Whole Foods?
Oh, sorry, say again.
I was saying, how should people approach the opening of something like Whole Foods? What's some concrete things that people can be doing?
I mean, I think for me, I always tell folks, you know, you choose what you have to choose what you want to choose. I think if it's an issue for you and you're concerned about the small businesses that we know historically, big chains that when they come in our community start to take them out or people are no longer able to, you support those small businesses. You know, you brought up a good example. If there's a Whole Foods on Lenox and you can pay, you know, $5, $6 and have options at breads at Whole Foods, for some people, that's great. There's going to be other people on fixed and low incomes that may not be able to do that. But it also makes me think about the businesses that are making breads in our community. Are they going to be able to last? Is that going to still be an option? Or are we only going to be able to now get it at that one place? Because I personally say something like bread and like gluten-based products, like I tend to think about Hot Bread Kitchen. I like going to 116th and going La Marqueta and picking it up and knowing a little bit more about that business and how they support women of color to make products and have like better jobs. You know, I like going to the farmers market and having that option or other options of other, you know, value added producers that are making those things. So I think it really depends on where people are at. If you feel like your neighborhood is changing and you're not really seeing you in your neighborhood anymore, speak up and stand up about it. I think it's also where we're trying to put our hard-earned dollars, supporting the businesses that are here, lifting up the issues and pushing back and disrupting some of these like mainstream dominant culture systems. I mean, I think we need to do that on all levels. And yeah, if it's the Whole Foods, speak up. Go to the vendor. There are people there who are supposed to hear from the community about what they're supposed to sell, learn more and more, because just because it looks great and they have a lot of marketing dollars to make it look great doesn't necessarily mean it's supporting you and where your money should go. You know, that's really kind of my like first level defense, is really kind of empower yourself to get the information you need, support the businesses that you want, and also know why you're fighting against certain things so you know what you're pushing against.
And so another question I have, kind of still talking about the systematic stuff that's going on, you know, you can eat good things at home and you could serve good things to your family, but then if your kids going to school and being, you know, given something that maybe doesn't follow the diet that you're following at home, or is just not getting the nutrients that you want. I mean, like when I was growing up, you know, I would have my meal at school a day, and sometimes that'd be my only meal for the day until dinner. So it really had a big effect. It wasn't just like my school lunch. It was like, you know, 50 to 75% of my diet as a kid. So can you talk about the issues going on at that level and maybe some work that's happening around that?
Oh, yeah. This is actually the work that quite a few of my partners and comrades are working on. Folks like community food advocates. I think, there's so many different levels to kind of connecting farm to school or school food. And just like you, Sean, that meal, that school-based meal was like probably your only, if not one of your few meals in the day. There's still so many students throughout the boroughs that remains true. And again, I think for me, I see when I'm trying to think about systemic approaches and my work through policy and also in the grassroots and getting organizing and talking to folks about what we can change, I think it's the things that we can do as individuals, and there's the things that we can address on those systemic levels. So if it is an opportunity to kind of bring food that you want to bring, that's one option. I see more and more kids trying to do that. Our lifestyles are so busy, that's not really realistic for everyone. I think these are the opportunities and places that we should push school food and support community groups that are working on school food to increase healthy food in schools, change their procurement practices, encourage our schools to be a site for CSA, there's school-based CSAs. There's a farmer that I know that's working with a charter school in Washington Heights on incorporating healthy food that she grows from her farm. Her name is Miriam. And building a school-based CSA and also trying to build advocacy amongst the students in that school. So there's so many different levels, and school is such a mammoth, monolithic thing, but I do see that there's policies more and more around school food. There's the National School Food Coalition. I might be saying their name wrong, I apologize. But I think for us as eaters, as folks that is impacting our lives, our children, their health, what they're eating, we need to continue to push them to find ways to build policies that encourage them to source locally, buy from the farmers that we believe and trust in, make those systems possible. So it starts to show not just in conversations about, at the DOE level, but we're starting to see it in our cafeterias. So when you drop your kid off at school, you can see your advocacy and work on that plate. We need to start seeing more whole food there. So I would continue to say, keep an eye out for the alerts around school food and the Child Nutrition Reauthorization Act that's coming up. There's NYC CNR that does advocacy work, and it's a coalition of different groups that work on those type of issues, and continue to advocate and ask for it. Work with your PTA to try to build other grassroots level food opportunities in your school. And be willing to chip in that time and energy and ask your friends to do as well and fellow parents.
Yeah, it's probably, I think there's so much work happening around a lot of these issues, and most of the times people don't know about the work that's happening. That's not by coincidence that people don't know. But once we do find out, I think we have a social responsibility to start sharing, those ideas and those initiatives and those actions that are being taken with our, friends, family, and really trying to galvanize our communities. And, like you said, there are individual choices, but at the same time, we're stronger as a collective. So Absolutely. It's like taking it to the next level, making the individual choice and then finding ways to, bring the collective together and, have a bigger effort, a bigger kind of, impact. It sounds like too, I think we agree on this, but just to play devil's advocate, many people would argue that, people just need to make better choices, that people are just, there's options out there, there's healthy food options that are just a couple blocks away from the neighborhood that we're living in, or people, can just be more proactive in their personal choices and not let themselves get unhealthy and eat all these poor foods. What do you think of that narrative and the people who are saying that?
Well, I think that narrative really comes from two places, either sometimes internalized oppression, but also it's really dictated by dominant culture in a lot of ways. And you're on some level, yes, there are a lot of people and a lot of groups trying to do work in communities to increase the access to healthy options and exercise, like what you're doing with RevFit, what farmers are trying to do with farmers markets and CSAs. So it's not, there are options there. We can always have more. We can always continue to work on increasing the awareness. But I think sometimes some of these narratives that we're hearing are coming from dominant culture, and again, like not really speaking to the history in our culture and culturally resonant and relevant items that we know of and speak of, or our history. Most of us Black and brown folks, indigenous folks, come from agrarian, growing folks and culture. So it's been so long since we've had those connections, but we also kind of forget that we have people who are still growing in our communities and want to bring kind of that food and build those options. I think, for me, doing a lot of work around food, I see things like demos and cooking demos and creating access, but access doesn't necessarily connect to everyone. There's different trigger points, there's different things that resonate with different people, especially with different cultures and communities. And I think it's for us folks that believe and support these communities to find ways to continue to connect with better and healthier, and finding having the dialogue and the conversations that are non-dominant culture driven. So for me, for instance, a good example of that is I see a lot of times, and I'm not taking away from cooking demos at all or saying that healthy food is bad. And I do appreciate and support eating locally and seasonally. However, when you see something like a kohlrabi slaw, that may not necessarily speak to a lot of what we like to eat in our diet.
What is that?
A kohlrabi slaw? You mean like a root vegetable? It's like thrown in our area. This is like the great time. You can slice it up, eat it with carrots.
Yum.
You can do like a demo, and it's awesome. I'm not taking away from it. However, that may not necessarily really connect with everybody in our community. There's other healthy food that we're growing right here in our community that might say, that might speak to some folks. Like maybe instead of just doing a kohlrabi slaw at a cooking demo, or again, something that's just based on just seasonality, we can think a little bit more culturally relevant and think about making a recipe based on callaloo. There's so many people in our community that come from Caribbean cultures. Callaloo is a weed. The callaloo is actually and for some farmers and growers, things they're not trying to grow. And yet there's so many folks in our community that want to eat that and will pay to eat that. We should have more demos. We should have more food in our area that can be grown seasonally and can be grown locally, that speaks to the foods that we see and we eat at home. I personally think, and that's kind of where some of my current work I'm trying to do with some of my partners, is to find those connections and build new connections that are not dominant culture driven, but are dialogues and conversations and cultivating culture and recipes and demos from us, and connecting hopefully to other folks in our areas. Another example I have is from the Kelly Street Garden. My friend, the garden manager there, Cheryl, she was harvesting sweet potatoes and was cutting the sweet potato leaves and was going to throw them out. And some elders in her community were like, no, what are you doing? We eat the sweet potato leaves, we saute them and we eat them. She even as an expert in urban ag and growing and a farmer, didn't even think of that and was going to throw them in the compost. Meanwhile, there's people in the community who are actually using and would want to have those things. So, to me, I think it's not just about what's there, it's also thinking a little bit more deeper into our culture and reflecting back in our history and what we used to eat, what we used to grow, what folks still grow and eat, and bringing that and increasing awareness that that's available in our community so we can buy it, support it, grow it, eat it. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting that we're having this conversation. I guess I already know where you stand on this stuff, but, because I think that's the other argument. It's just like, you know, that internalized oppression is like, oh, we eat culturally this way. And when I say this way, I'm talking
Right.
about fast
Fast
food
food,
and,
soul
you know,
food.
fried food. Yeah, that kind of stuff. And there's some truth
To
to,
that.
yeah, but at the same time, if we dig a little deeper, we see that there's so many things that we eat culturally that are so good for us, that are superfoods that, you know, Whole Foods will
Exactly.
probably be selling, you know, 20 times the price in a couple of years when someone else finds out about it. You know?
Exactly.
Like
I
coconut water.
mean,
I remember buying that in Washington Heights, like when I was a kid for like nothing. And like now that
yes.
baked coconut water is like $6 a bottle for like 8 ounces.
No, exactly. Or now, like in Harlem, like you can go and get like a fried chicken dinner, which used to be like a unique or special treat, something that you had like once a week or at like after a special church service. You now can get it all day, every day. And like now you're trying to pay, you know, like $20 for a fried chicken deal at a certain restaurants, or like $25 for shrimp and grits, which is like, hold up, it's grits. Like,
That's right.
mm-hmm.
And you know,
Yeah.
and like I was like chia seeds. I was remember when I first got
Mm-hmm.
into chia seeds. I first heard about chia seeds because I was studying indigenous running culture in Mexico,
Wow.
and so like chia seed was like the cheapest thing they could get access to, and all this kind of stuff. And then I was
Yeah.
like, oh my god, like this is great. And then I saw the superfood label plastered on it. I was like,
Exactly.
oh, I guess I can't afford this anymore. But
No, exactly.
yeah.
And there's probably folks that have the same, like similar stories around like quinoa, and now it's like $8 a box.
Yeah, and so I think, you know, that education is important too, and I've seen it happening too. But you know, maybe there's more resources that we can tap into to find out more. You know, I mean, obviously our
Mm-hmm.
culture gets erased through colonization and displacement and all these kind of things. So we have to work extra hard to find out about these things. But there's also, you know, our elders. We have
Yeah.
resources that we can tap into that we kind of, you know, sometimes I think we don't realize how valuable those resources can be.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, to me, my work, and when I do speaking engagements or workshops, I really try to always start and honor and speak to the work that has been done before me, and the work of elders, true elders, elders who have that history, have that knowledge, have that expertise, but are able to continue to work with us and share and show us the way. Like the work I'm doing now, I wouldn't be here without like a Booker T. Watley or Fannie Lou Hamer. Like they're the people who were doing that work. I'm just trying to continue to connect it to others in our community.
That's right. So let's talk more about some of the things that you've done, right? We've been talking about like kind of
Uh-huh.
the systematic ills and, you know, briefly touching on the struggles behind them, but there's so much work being done and you've had a good role in a lot of that stuff. You know, when I first met you, it was through learning more about, you know, developing CSAs here in New York City. Can you talk a little
Yeah.
bit about what a CSA is, and then we'll kind of go from there?
Oh, sure. So CSA stands for Community Supported Agriculture. Um, it has also, it's known, it's, um, how do I explain? It has roots, again, like Dr. Booker T. Watley in Southern. He had a Southern clientele membership group.
Like a
They
co-op kind of thing?
like a co-op kind of thing,
Hmm.
exactly. It also is, CSA also started sprouting in other countries like Japan, and you know, it also came back to you know, our places here. And in my work at Just Food, what I was doing was fostering a network of CSAs that had started 18 and now 20 years prior.
Hmm.
And the folks that started and the farmers that started bringing the CSA model to our area, to the New York City area in those times, there was this a point where there weren't very many access and outlets and options to get food from our farmers in other regions. I mean, in our region, from other areas, say in the Hudson Valley and
Right.
such. And they were also, as farmers, facing issues of land, staying on their land, building their livelihoods. So this model, you know, in a lot of different areas and places had become like an opportunity to build new markets for farmers and for community folks connect directly to farmers to get the food that they wanted. So this is really kind of that continuation and work based on that model, where it's a direct relationship between community members and farmers. It's typically in our area runs for a season, either a summer season and or a winter season. You get vegetables that are harvested and fresh picked from the farmer. It's farmer's choice. They know what they're doing. They know what they're harvesting, and you get a share. And a share can be anywhere from 4 to 12 items, depending on your farmer, and they bring it directly to you. So there's no middleman, there's no market, there's no distribution. The distribution is you and that farmer. They drop it down, volunteers start a group, you run it together to make it actually happen. That also saves on costs. The farmers, since they're able to work directly with you, are able to embed that cost savings into the share price and cost.
So real quick before you keep going.
Sorry.
So why would a farmer benefit from this? Why wouldn't the farmer just make a relationship with some kind of supermarket or things like that?
There's a few reasons. Certain farmers want to grow a certain way, whether sustainably, organically. They want to have certain practices. It's also good for farmers to have diversified incomes, and there's just certain price points, certain procurement levels that are very different in the different outlets and marketing options that you have. So there are some farmers that are large enough that have the capacity to grow to a supermarket. Supermarkets have a lot of restrictions and regulations about growing. People expect supermarkets to offer them food that looks perfect, that seems perfect, and they're buying from a lot of different people, so the pricing is a little bit different. But some folks want to have that relationship with the farmer. Some farmers want to have that relationship with the community members. They want to be able to see them, to directly relate to them, tell them what's happening on their farm. And that really blends well with farmers that are small to mid-size.
So we're talking about small farms, middle-sized farms. We're not talking about bigger farms. So
no.
Usually. So we're talking about like family-owned, small operations. And so I'm playing devil's advocate. I know all this stuff, so I'm just kind of trying to pick it out of you.
Tease it out of me.
So can you talk about what is happening systematically to the farmers on a national level that, it seems like there's a struggle happening with farmers in this country?
Yeah, farmers, there's quite a few struggles that farmers are facing. Farmers are facing issues of land, owning land, preserving land, being able to live the livelihoods that they want and be farmers. There's a lot of pressures to grow not diversified crops, what we would think of as different fruits and vegetables. There's subsidies or money given to grow monocrops, big crops like soybean and corn for biofuel and, factory farming and things like that. So there aren't the same subsidies for small diversified farmers. But we as people who eat, humans that need to eat food, we need diversified farmers. We need fruits and vegetables. We need pasture raised and healthy and humanely raised meat, if that's what you choose to eat still. So we need these kind of opportunities, CSAs, farmers markets, these direct opportunities to connect with those kind of farmers to help them stay on their land, grow the food that we want to support and need. We want to see more of farmers that look like us. There's been, definite systemic racism throughout policy and history. On federal level, there's things like Pidford that people can look into even more. There's still policies that kind of focus or prioritize rural and not so much on the urban. We're trying to change those kind of things. But when I say urban, I mean urban ag and growing in urban areas for folks. Because we need both. Because we can, and we need it. We need to support rural farmers, and we also need to support farming in our neighborhoods that are closer to us as well. And I think, when you think about farmers, not only are small and mid-sized farmers getting pushed out, and we're seeing more and more factory farms or big CAFOs, you're seeing less and less farmers of color, and they're getting out. So again, when people, it always kind of comes back to those systemic issues of inequity and racism. And there were policies that, while they were supporting farmers or different farmers, were historically not available to farmers of color. And that has also created a decrease, as we can see, severe decreases of farmers of color throughout the country. So, these other ways of farmers markets and supporting local growers or regional growers in these direct relationships like CSAs or farmers markets are a way to help and support those farmers that we want to see. And farmers of color, LGBTQ farmers that maybe started in urban areas or moving to rural areas because they want to grow on a larger scale. For me, it's important for folks to be able to know about those farmers, know about the work they're trying to do, know that they support work on environmental, social, and food justice. So we, in turn, can support them with our dollars.
Yeah, I remember.
And other mission-aligned farmers that we see and that we know in our area.
I'm such a New Yorker. When I first went to a farmer's market, I saw it was a bunch of Asian and Latino, and I was like, "You're farmers? Like you be?" I thought it was all like white folks and jumps.
Exactly.
But yeah, so it definitely adds a different layer to the whole conversation, because when we start knowing where our food comes from and happening on that end, I think when we start getting access to these things like CSAs and farmers markets, is a deeper appreciation. So that education is needed. So for the CSA, so you have a small or medium-sized farm. They're developing relationships with groups in different communities, whether it be like a group of friends or neighbors, a co-op, organization, school. And so they develop this direct distribution. So they get the stuff from the farm, they bring it, and it's usually, they're not bringing it far, right? It's harder to bring it.
The majority of CSAs in our area, I know for the Just Food Network, the farmers are within 250 miles. So that's like a day's trip. Other CSAs are in similar areas. So part of the understanding is you want to support local farmers, and you want that food to be grown close to you. And it also is the turnaround on bringing the food down.
Right, exactly. And also probably, making it more cost effective, because transporting it to other bigger regions is harder. So it's cheaper. So how much cheaper? Like when I go to a CSA, what can I expect versus doing my local shopping at a supermarket?
Yeah, that's a big question. That's a good question people ask all the time. What you're getting in cost savings and working as CSA is that the farmer is able to grow what they know, because the relationship and the understanding that you're building with them to be a part of the CSA starts in advance of the season. So in fact, the CSA, you pay in advance, and you're helping the farmer be able to plant and have a home for that food, know what to grow, and know that it's going to find a place, it's going to find a home. So, and since they're able to grow, more accurately, grow with intention, and grow with markets, with shareholders, you're able to grow in a variety or in a bulk in a way that it creates a different price point, and it creates a value to that CSA member, because they're not now looking at you as an individual consumer and trying to figure out like the margins at that point. They see you as a collective, as a group. So if a CSA farmer has 7 CSA groups, anywhere from 50 to 100 people throughout the city, they're able to grow and base their pricing of your share on that. That's, a different price point than, say, what they would have to do to figure out an agreement between a grocery store or even at a farmer's market.
Right. So the price difference can be there. It can also not be the biggest price difference is what I hear you saying. Sometimes it might, you know, be similar kind of, it might cost similarly because of the deals that big supermarkets can
Yeah,
make. But it's also, you're not only buying the product, you're buying into the model, you're buying into the support
exactly.
of this network,
Right. So
which
what,
will in
yeah,
turn strengthen going forward and hopefully develop more of these things.
exactly. And what I try to really push for people to see is when you go to a grocery store and you say you go to the produce aisle and you see a tomato,
Mm-hmm.
that tomato is a commodity at that point. You have no idea where that tomato grew, who picked it, did that person get paid well, how is that person living, what farm it came from, how far did it come from, is it from California, is it from New York, is it from Peru? You have no idea. All you're seeing is a perfect looking tomato.
Mm.
When you're working directly with a farmer, what you're paying for is, say, a CSA tomato is different in the sense of, yes, it's still a tomato, but you know that farmer, you know their growing practices, you know how they're growing, if they're growing organically or not. They can tell you, they want to tell you, they want to show you. Many CSA farmers, if not all, create opportunities for their shareholders to come visit their farms when the season is right, and they're able to do it when they're not too busy farming. So you see it, it's not a commodity, it's an actual item. And yes, there's some cost that comes to it. So farmers are trying to figure out through the CSA model how to make a price affordable for folks, but also how to make it at a price that they're able to grow it and grow it well.
Right, of course, yeah.
Yeah. So you're
And
buying all of that when you're buying into a CSA for sure.
yeah, and how many CSAs exist in New York City that you know of?
Oh, that's a good question. For my last count at Just Food, when I was there, I was working with about anywhere from 109 to 115 CSAs in the Just Food network alone. There's also the local Root CSA that Wenjay runs, and I believe she has 12 or 13 CSA locations in her network, mostly in Manhattan, Lower Manhattan, and Brooklyn. And there are probably a few here or there that, you know, farmers are building relationships in pockets of areas or in neighborhoods themselves and may not necessarily connect to some of these other well-known networks.
So 150 to 200, somewhere in that range. And
Mm-hmm.
so they must be in the more affluent neighborhoods, right? Like, because we never hear of them.
No,
I'm digging
yeah,
again.
I mean, I think part of that, I know, devil's advocate, you know, part of the struggle is, you know, where CSAs are small, you know, businesses or community supported small businesses. These are not farmers that have big marketing budgets. They're able to like plaster your social media or your TV with like flashy, cute, you know, messaging to like let you know they're there. It's word of mouth, it's like hand run flyering, putting it out there, trying to get it word of mouth through our own networks and Facebook, trying to do a better job about networks and then letting the network do some of that work and increasing the messaging too. You know, you have some of these other food options that are now, you know, popping up in our neighborhoods that are kind of backed by like social tech folks that,
Right.
you know, social ventures and tech people that kind of have that money to have a marketing budget, where we're talking about are people doing it for themselves. But no, CSA is something that, you know, did start to create markets for farmers, but more and more people are trying to use the model to find ways to connect to all communities. So it's accessible and affordable to all, not just affluent folks that are able to pay completely upfront. And again, to note that there are definitely farmers that are trying to find ways to make their model work with that kind of community focus in mind, whether it is through SNAP, whether it is through installment payment plans to make it a little bit easier to pay upfront for their share, or even the obvious piece of coming into the neighborhoods that we live in. So these are things that are in East Harlem, they're in West Harlem, hoping to get even more in the Bronx. There are other people trying to do food access and food justice work in the Bronx. We have community-run farmers markets. We have mobile markets like Tanya Fields, trying to get food to folks where maybe we don't have CSAs there anymore, or finding people to create and start new CSAs. I mean, it's something that in my work as a CSA network manager I used to do, but I find myself still doing, even though it's not my like paid work, is encouraging folks to find partners and ways to connect to these groups and systems and start CSAs in their neighborhoods.
And there's
so
not only CSAs, right? There's other stuff,
no.
right? Can you tell some of the
There's
other models that you know?
farmers markets.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's community-run farmers markets. There are other farmers markets and other networks that run farmers markets. There are other ways to bring food into your community. Absolutely. CSAs is just one. There's farm shares. There's food boxes that are starting to pop up through other folks that have food and food hubs. So yeah, there's other options that are trying to bring food into communities, and it might come in different ways. And I think it's for us, and what I try to do is kind of share that information so folks know the difference between the models. So you know what you're doing and what you want and what you're supporting. And to be completely honest, full transparency, I am somebody that tries to hit all models. You will see me picking up my CSA share. I've been in different CSAs throughout in different parts of my community. I still go to farmers markets. I go to different farmers markets. And yeah, there are times when I go to grocery stores when I need to. So yeah, I think it's really about finding what's there, connecting to those networks, and working with each other to really build it, because no one person can do it. I've seen so many groups start and struggle or start and close because it was one person trying to do one thing. These really are community-run organizations and community-run businesses that really need community power behind it all. So if you don't feel, one, I always tell people to actually check in their neighborhood, because people will be surprised that there is something in their neighborhood, like 2 blocks down. But if by chance there isn't, or there's still need that's not being met by the existing models, like the existing farmers markets or the existing CSAs or farm shares, definitely reach out to these groups like Just Food, like Local Roots, that are working with folks to build these sites.
And yeah, and we're gonna, just for our listeners, so you know, we're gonna do a whole follow-up episode. I think we're saying sometime in late October, maybe early November. We'll see what we can figure out with Qiana. Yeah. But we're gonna actually, like, you know, take you guys to these different sites and the different types of models, and talk about, you know, what are the best options, you know, how to diversify, and if you're interested, how to get it started, how to get it going in your neighborhood. Absolutely. So I have a whole show dedicated to that. So Qiana, I don't want to take up too much of your time. So just to close out, what do you think, you know, what do you think needs to happen? What's the big picture stuff that needs to happen outside of, you know, eating healthier things and building better relations with farms? Like, what do we need to do to change the disparities and the woes that we're dealing with when it comes to food access here in the U.S.?
I think we need to continue to build power in our communities and increase our awareness of not just the issues that we know we're facing, but starting to create alternative models and ideas on how to address those issues with ourselves. So to me, that's supporting small businesses, that's building cooperative businesses, that's supporting businesses that are trying to create new economies that are either hyper-local, like Ray Figueroa says, or building relationships in the region with farmers and producers that we see and grow. I think it also is for us as individuals, as consumers, to not just see ourselves as consumers, to start to see ourselves in different parts of the chain and finding ways that we can support each other, whether it's through transportation, whether it's through actual food, whether it's through producing, creating healthy jobs, finding ways to support those things, and finding ways to connect and hearing more about the policies and the work, because it can sound so above us and so over our head, is signing on to alerts, gaining new action, building solidarity in your communities, finding the intersection of the issues that are important to us, important to you, that intersect with food, that is housing, that is environment, that is social, and build solidarity so we can really start continuing to push for policies that speak to the issues that are ours. I also always encourage folks to get engaged and continue to get engaged in your PTA, in your local community board, speak at your city council, offer testimony when possible. When there's a law, you know, that you don't agree with, or something's coming down in your city or your neighborhood that you don't like, pick up the phone, speak to that senator, speak to your borough president, speak, push, agitate, and disrupt.
That's right. And so if people want to connect with you, how can they best do that?
Oh, yeah, that's a good question. Let me see. I'm on Twitter. My Twitter is Qiana Mickie, RaGamickie. I'm also in medium.com, same tag name, and I'm on Instagram, same name, Qiana Mickie.
All right, cool. And we'll put that in the show notes.
Stop me in the neighborhood when you
So thanks so much for coming on. We really appreciate it. It was definitely insightful. There's so much stuff that we could have gone into, but I'm sure we will in the coming weeks and months, and keep building with each other. So thanks so much.
Absolutely.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Cool. And for those who are listening, you know, we'll put all that stuff in the show notes, and we'll add some links for different resources that you can tap into that Qiana was talking about. And of course, you can find out more information by going to our site, revolutionaryfitness.org. And you can find our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, and all those good podcast networks. And of course, drop a rating so we can get more, you know, people finding out about the show and getting access to this knowledge and these resources. So again, thanks to Qiana, and we'll see all of y'all in a couple days. Let's move together. Peace.